This is Channel 253. Beep, boop, boop.
On this episode of the Grit and Grain Podcast.
That's been one of the things that I've taken away from this entire decade so far, is that relationships that you make with people and that you make in the industry and the name that you build in the industry can far exceed, the size of your company or the reach of your company.
Welcome to the Grit and Grain Podcast, where we explore and celebrate the craft beer industry, community, and history in Tacoma, Washington, and surrounding Pacific Northwest areas. Thank you so much for hanging out. Let's get to it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Grit and Grain Podcast, coming to you guys from the historic Parkway Tavern in Tacoma, Washington. Talking about all of your favorite beer nerd shit from this city and from surrounding cities. And that's what today's going to be about, beer nerd shit and cider nerd shit from cities around this city. My name is Matt McLaren. Here always with Ron Swarner.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. I have a good friend behind the special mic today. Very happy about that. Also, on a sad note, I only can think about is Pat Nagel, who had an unexpected heart attack last week, and he's pretty much the same age as me. So
that's a little different.
Yeah.
Good thing you hike, man.
What a wonderful man he was. I have known him for a long time. Back in the 90s when he started the Harmon, he was cocky Pat, and he was, he was skiing and biking and a partier, and that was fun, Pat. And then he got really serious about his brewery and in the 2000s, and that's when
Pat was different.
Yeah, and Pat and I we worked pretty close and on projects such as the Arts and Joint Base Lewis McCord. He was a big proponent of the base. He brewed the Striker Stout for the Striker unit.
That's right.
And Tacoma. He was Tacoma first, and he championed the city. And I miss him.
I think a lot of people do. He named all of his beers after Tacoma.
Yeah, he did.
Yep. That was, if you guys are drinking a beer, definitely raise a glass to Pat Nagel, who I think a lot of people in Tacoma have their own history and stories with him because he knew everybody, and he was a huge part of this community. So it's always like a bummer when somebody who's influenced this industry as much as he has passes away, and it's a bummer when it happens multiple times in a short span of time. Which it's always tough. But raise a glass to Pat for sure.
I miss you, Pat.
Yeah, man. Geez, that's been on my mind a lot too. And then Sean Jackson's here too.
Yeah.
Hey, Sean.
At least in spirit.
How are you?
I'm great. Still nips are full mast. All things considered.
Nothing's gonna change that ever.
No.
Amen, man.
And
mind on the mission.
Yeah, and I'm also super excited about our guest today.
Yeah.
It is the Eric Willard from Two Beers Brewing and Seattle Cider Company.
Fuck yeah.
Woo! Yeah.
Yay. Thank you.
And just keeping the theme, like what we're drinking.
What are we drinking?
Is the Sig 4 Mac Irish Stout.
Right. So if you're listening, last episode or two, we talked about all of our good friend Mac McTurnan passing away as well, also from an unexpected heart attack. This is a tribute beer to Mac and his legacy, and very much in line with Pat and his legacy. They were both very pro Tacoma and very pro this community, and getting people involved in a very approachable and loving way. So, to Mac, man.
Cheers.
All right.
Wow,
I want to talk about nerdy shit.
Yeah, extra handsome today.
Well, thank you very much.
Kick that off on a...
Woo!
Yeah.
Dodge that musket shot. But
So,
glad I got that going for me.
I'm glad you're here today.
I'm super honored to be here. Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Eric has been in the room a couple of times actually for these recordings, and it's always like delightful. So I'm really glad that you're behind the mic this time.
Oh, thanks.
Plus, you have contributed quite a bit, I think, to beer and cider in Washington. And I think there's probably some context to your specific work that maybe people don't know or understand. So yeah, I'm excited to get your story on the record, man.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much. It is a little bit more fun, I think, on the other side of the microphone of those previous weeks. Like it feels a little bit more pressure on this side for sure, but
That'll
looking
change after
forward
a beer.
to it. Yeah, that's what beer's
You
for.
just gotta drink fast.
That's right.
Pick up the pace, buddy.
Sorry, I've been on spreadsheets all day long. It was inventory day at work, so
You need a few beers then.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
quite a few.
Like two of them.
Like
I was gonna go.
All right. Got it. It's out of my system. It's out of my
who's got that on the
system.
bingo card?
Sorry.
Can someone mark that one off?
You've been in the industry a long time, my friend, and but always based in Tacoma. Done a lot of driving.
Oh, tons of driving. Yeah, and that's even now I commute back and forth every day, pretty much. We've
Fucking dedication, man.
yeah, we've moved out here from East Coast just after I got married. My wife is from in Philadelphia. Her dad's from just outside Philly. Mom's from the Bronx. We met when we lived in we met in Jersey when I lived in Brooklyn. We moved out to one corner of the U.S. that neither one of us had family. That was back in 2006, and spent a little bit of time just kind of South Seattle area, and then quickly came down to Tacoma after that.
What brought you down here?
It was honestly, it was kind of the beer scene at
Yeah?
the time. We had gone around to some places up in Seattle, and everyone that we met was from someplace else. And then we met some friends of friends, and they're like, hey, we're going to go down to Tacoma. And we're like, Tacoma? Like, I think I've heard things about that place. And we immediately come into a bar and sat down, and I'm just someone that would literally talk to anyone. And so person right next to me, I'm like, oh, hey, so where are you from? Expecting some random place like I got when we would hit places up in Seattle.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, we're from just down the street. I'm like, sorry, what? It's like, oh, yeah, third generation Tacoma. And so despite the fact of it being a larger city and right off the highway and all that, it was a city that had communities. And it was a city that promoted community and promoted generational communities. And I thought that was something that was really, really cool. So
For sure.
we found a house, still live in the same house that we moved into back in 06.
Man.
Tiny little place. We've got a different family now. So we've got our two boys, 10 and 12. When we first moved down here, we had the stereotypical, pit bulls. Big old baby blue nose, dark blue brindle.
Good call, Tacoma.
Yeah. And then we did the whole homestead thing. We had our chickens. So you would drive down our street, and we'd have our chickens would be out either in the front yard or in the street. And people would come down and have to honk and wait for chickens to go across the street. Our pit bulls would break into the chicken coop and nap with the chickens.
Ooh, I thought that was going a different
was
way.
gonna be fun.
I was like, yo, man, slow down.
You're like, what? Yeah.
It's adorable that that story ended with them taking naps with your chicken.
Yeah, it
Fucking hell.
was. It was quite humorous, and it was just so cool because even with all the things that we did there, we were able to, everything's Tacoma. So, our chickens, we'd go down to Garden Sphere and get all our chicken feed and make sure we had everything done for that. And then when we changed, the setup of our yard, like coming into pandemic, everyone's like retreating back into their houses. So we decided to just completely landscape the lawn and called up Travis and the folks at Garden Sphere. It's like, hey, we want a bunch of plants because we want something that's pretty for us and pretty for everybody else in the neighborhood as well.
Oh, man.
So it just, Tacoma became that thing that there's been opportunities and chances of like, oh, hey, maybe we should move here. Maybe we should move there. And there's always been that thing in the back of our heads of like, well, it's not Tacoma.
It's hard to imagine loving somewhere else as much.
It is tough. It is tough. And I was born and raised in a really small town in the Midwest in Michigan. And to go from Michigan to Brooklyn was quite a shock. But to come from Brooklyn to here was just, it was a really welcoming community and neighborhood, and has quickly become part of who we are.
Were you working at Tiny's Organic in Seattle at the time?
I was. So when I first came out, it was construction, but back in 2006, 2007, construction. Yeah, just kind of went downhill. And then Carla was working for a farm that was based out of East Wenatchee. And I came on board and started helping them manage everything from their farmers markets to wholesale to the CSA program that they had. And that put me right across the street of a startup brewery that just kind of moved down into the Soto, Georgetown neighborhood, and that was Two Beers. Right when they moved out of the active space and found an actual production facility, it was right there.
As Ron mentions, their previous closet.
Yeah, exactly. Just is
Tiny little joint in
tiny.
Fremont.
Real small. And then I got to know the guys over there, and they got to know me and found out I lived in Tacoma. Well, what startup brewery doesn't love someone that lives in Tacoma when you're a Seattle-based brewery? Then you might be able to encourage, coerce, bribe them.
Bribe with beer.
Yeah, to then start delivering your kegs to Tacoma. So in my little Scion, I would like strap down all these 50 liters, and I had a route. I can't remember what day of the week it was, but I would drop off on the way home. I would swing by the Spar, drop off a keg of IPA. I would swing by here at the Parkway and drop off
Crooked
Belgian Wit. Yeah.
Yep.
And then I would drop off another keg at the Red Hot. And so those three remained consistent. And so for years before I actually got involved with either of the companies, because I came on with the founding of Seattle Cider. So I was dropping off kegs for Two Beers for a couple years.
Damn.
First couple of times didn't realize that I probably should have brought a hand truck. And so it would just be me kind of trying to like walk awkwardly with that. At that time, I was probably a good 50 pounds lighter than I am now. So it was even more awkward. It was a tough lesson to learn. I'm like, man, this keg almost weighs as much as I do. But
Is that why you started body lifting?
I got a little bit into that. That actually a little bit was more a result from all my years on the road and then coming back into the office and realizing I'm like, wow, I have the shape of an individual who spends 50 to 60,000 miles a year on the road, eats exclusively at bars, and spends 10 to 12 hours in the market in random places because
Shout out to every beer rep.
Yeah, I mean,
Every beer rep
like,
fucking ever.
just, like kudos, every single one of you, because it's not easy, and especially when we were starting out with Seattle Cider, I had from everywhere from the brewery all the way down to the California-Oregon border.
Damn.
So I would, especially when we were going down into Oregon, I would be visiting every single one of the branches of our distributor once a quarter. And so, like, 4 times a year, I'm doing that big circuit, but at least once a month, I'm spending 4 or 5 days down in the Portland market. And then I've got Tacoma, and I've got South Seattle, so Federal Way, going out into Enumclaw, that entire area. So it was a lot.
So much windshield time, man.
Oh, so much. But that was what you did back then.
That's how you hustled.
Yeah. There was no one else. I mean, it was myself, and we had one other sales rep at the time when we started Seattle Cider, and that was Mark. And so he had everything from the brewery north. I had everything from the brewery south, and we just went. So it was quite a bit.
Damn.
So that was 2013 when the cidery started, right?
Yeah.
And so it was the first cidery in Seattle since Prohibition.
Yeah.
And you had a front row seat to the emerging of the craft cider market.
Yeah, that was that was kind of interesting to go from, on the, couple years previous, chucking like peaches and apples at Tyler Pickle. He was one of our brewers at the time, and now he works Hops Direct.
Shit.
He's a Pewter family, so he's from that whole family. But he was brewing at Two Beers at the time, so we would always hang out. But to go from all that of like farm life, figuring out which apples the blend should be. Brent at the time, he was our head cider maker and other founder as well. And just trying to come up with a blend of apples, what we had easy access to, what was in surplus, and then trying to get that out to the market. Everybody knew Angry Orchard at the time. And then there was, right when we came out, there was another local cider company that was coming out as well. But they were more, Seattle-based. I wasn't the guy that was up in Seattle. I was in Tacoma. Mm-hmm. So, in Tacoma, it was either Angry Orchard or who?
That's it.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And our distributor at the time didn't have Angry Orchard in their portfolio in the South Sound.
Oh,
and so they were super excited for that opportunity. But just seeing that coming in, Angry Orchard made it a little easier because if we were out a couple years prior to that, we didn't have the money, we didn't have the marketing behind us to be able to convince somebody, hey, that IPA that's all the rage right now, or one of these other craft beers that everybody's going nuts for, I've got a slightly more expensive keg for you that you're going to want to charge.
My whole job.
Yeah, exactly.
God damn it.
I've got a slightly more expensive keg of something that not a lot of people are going to understand yet, but eventually they will, and you're going to appreciate it, and you're going to be on the cutting edge of what's going to be a new emerging category in the craft market. How do you like that?
I hate this right now.
Yeah, it's...
I fucking hate this.
Sorry. I've had to process that trauma, too.
No, it's fine. That's just I send that the same email every Monday.
Yeah. But to see what craft cider has become over the years, and then even as we were talking just a little bit before this started, of just even how the style of cider changed to meet the demand of the market, where you're going from cider that's treated a lot more like a wine, and because of that, it's a longer maturation due to the tannins and the makeup of the apples that they typically were using. And what was coming out into the market, in order to be able to turn and meet the demand appropriately, you needed something that was a quicker process. So you have a low to no maturation cider. So when you're looking at a cider that you would press and age and let mellow and mature, and you sit on it for a year and a half, compared to a cider that you're turning in 2 weeks, that's a big difference in makeup and body and just overall experience. And so how do you get people to be on board with that?
Sure.
You're a brewery, and then you're a cidery. So are you thinking, let's make some cider for beer drinkers?
Kind of.
At least initially, you must.
At least, yeah. I mean, when we first came out, we saw that the trend that was emerging was cider. Cider's coming out there, but it's all super, super sweet. So what we know of beer trends, people come out, and when they first come into craft beer, ambers, browns, things like that. Even with wine, they'll drink sweeter wines, but eventually they go to things that are more complex, a little bit more bitter, a little drier. So you've got things like your IPAs, and eventually, if you've been in the industry long enough, you go from IPAs to lagers, and then that's where you kind of sit and you're happy for a long time.
Dude, fucking seriously.
Yeah.
That's exactly true.
That's kind of how you deal with
When
it.
we
That's-
interview new people, we interview new people, we always ask them what kind of beer they have in their fridge, and we can usually tell how long they've been doing this based on what they say.
Oh yes, yeah.
And the people who have been doing it the longest have Pilsners in their fucking fridge.
Absolutely. And so even going from there of knowing that in the market, you know, we needed something that was going to bridge that gap of what's on there that's kind of really, really sweet to something local and craft, because we saw that people cared about that.
Sure.
And so to be able to have something local and craft, but that can step them into what ultimately becomes drier, long-term, you know, you're bringing the cider category is almost 50-50 male, female, starts at 21 to 23 and continues on into the 50s, where craft beer, predominantly male, 28 to 32 is when they start really coming into it, because it's after college when they've got money and they're trying to experiment with new things. And to have access to such a larger demographic, it's something that
was shocking.
was a great opportunity for us. And so could we make something with these dessert or culinary apples, a low to no maturation, that even though most hardcore beer drinkers at that time would not give cider time of day,
Right.
could we get them to at least try it and be like, okay, that's not bad?
Yeah, I don't hate that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Like it's kind of that, you know, if we get I don't hate that, then that's kind of great.
Dude,
And then from there to be able to expand things out, because it was really tough at that
because
time.
now the door's open for people.
The door's open. I mean, by the time that we launched Seattle Cider, I mean, that was also peak of triple IPA life. You know, the palate-wrecking beers that everybody was going nuts for. Hop Mob was in full effect. To try to get people to go from some of the most bitter, highest IBU Imperial IPAs and be okay with drinking a cider. The other thing that we really had to keep in mind too is like keeping our ABV in check, because that was also another key indicator. It was everybody was looking at how many IBUs your IPA was, but what's the ABV?
Sure.
You know, oh, it's only a 5%. I'm not drinking a 5% IPA.
Not wasting my extra dollar on this.
Exactly.
Yep.
Like I got to see 6% on there. 6% or above, like 7.2.
That
Let's
is
go
totally
there.
how people were buying beer.
But that was the mentality at that time.
Sure,
And
sure.
so we were trying to take a little bit of an inspiration from that, of like everybody's looking at IBUs and ABV. What are they going to look on for cider?
Right.
You know, everybody looks at cider as either like if it's a single varietal, what apple is it? You know, they might look at the ABV, but then we had to come up with an idea of like what is cider equivalent of IBUs, and that's going to be your dryness or your sweetness. And so we started right when we came out, we put that scale on there of
That's
like
so
dry
funny.
to sweet of like, and then it became not fully industry standard, but it started getting adopted by some other people
almost
in their
everybody does
ways,
it.
because it allowed the consumer to be educated.
Right.
So when they looked at it, they were able to see, oh, okay, what is it? Is this going to hit the key things that I want? And so those were some things that, you know, from that beer world and that beer experience really influenced how that cider was designed.
And when you say put it on there, here's the thing too. Like in my mind, as far as the can revolution in our state, beer, cider, otherwise, you kids were early in that game.
Dude,
Oh,
fucking
yeah.
seriously.
Early.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it was first craft brewery in Washington to do 16-ounce cans. That was 7 C's.
Yep.
I think Two Beers laid the claim to the 12-ounce cans. And then when we launched Seattle Cider, the biggest cider category that was on a shelf at that time was the import ciders. And so they were all in the tall boys. And so if we were going to get cut into any
you had,
cider
like,
section
shit.
or try to take over any space in that retail market, in that off-prem market, we needed to be right next to those guys. And so that's why we came out with the tall boys. That's why we came out with a 16-ounce package format. And then even, too, it's like the play that we could have for on-prem as well. Of, you know, if you go in and get a cider, and even to this day, you see people that kind of aren't a fan of, like, if you have a can of cider, like, here's a 12-ounce can of cider. They want to have pint for pint. And so, like, that works well for stadiums. That works well for on-prem. That works well for off-prem at that time with import market and all that. Now we're seeing that shift. You know, now that cider has been around for as long as it has, and it's been consumed so much like beer in places like the Parkway, like Peaks and Pints, like that has changed how off-prem has looked at that category. Now cider is grouped in with beer. And so if they're expanding sets and they're expanding programming or anything like that, they're expanding programming to what looks like beer, which is that 6-pack 12-ounce now. And so even over the decade, we've seen that shift of off-prem go from, hey, let's get tall boys, because that's all everyone knew of cider, to now it's been around for a decade. Now your consumer's much more educated in that regard. You've educated them by being around for the last decade, and you fundamentally have changed their consumption habits and what they look for that. So now you're starting to see those sections grow. So now you have a lot of the cider companies that are out there. They not only have 16-ounce format packaging, but also 12-ounce. You know,
or just a mix of all of it to like maximize their.
Oh yeah, so you've got one flavor. Like even with us, you've got one flavor that's available in 3 to 4 different SKU and packaging format types. Where it's like, do you need a 12-pack? Do you need a 6-pack? Do you need a 4-pack? Do you need a loose pack? And being able to be responsive to that market.
Dude, all that foresight. I guess I never thought about it. Like I sold a ton of Seattle cider like right when I started as a buyer. And like I remember sort of seeing all this stuff, but I guess I never even like did the math on like what you guys might have been looking at in the beer world to sort of design your marketing approach to selling cider. But yeah, people asked about IBUs all the time. I had to write it on chalkboards, and it really like these days it's matters a lot less because a lot of people are starting to kind of come into the fact that it means a lot less than they think it does about the beer that they're drinking. But in cider, like your sweetness level really does make a difference, and having that information like readily available didn't exist before you guys, really. Not only because there wasn't a ton of cider out there, but because like nobody even thought to like give consumers that kind of information to help them make a decision. I don't know, that's awesome. It's crazy that you guys took your cues from beer and then like it worked.
Yeah,
5
years of a brewery behind us. Like we had to build off something, and Two Beers, especially at year 5, was just going nuts.
Dude, and Seattle Cider Dry, like now that you're saying like, oh, like what are people going to get into and stay into? If their trajectory is the same in the cider world as it is in beer, what are we going to make that's the opposite of something like Angry Orchard? Fucking Seattle Cider Dry, which just exploded. Just crazy. Yeah, man. We have to take a quick break, but I'm going to gush more about it. And Eric also brought some cider, so we're going to try some.
Nice.
Plus beer.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, we're going to take a quick break. We will be right back. Yeah, welcome back. Thank you guys for hanging out during the break. I know you heard the Channel 253 shout out during the break, but an extra special shout out to our producer, Doug, who's amazing and makes us sound so professional every single week.
Yay, Doug!
Love you, Doug.
Yeah, Doug.
And then a second extra special shout out once again to Drunk Herstory, which is coming up next week.
Yes.
If you didn't get your tickets, I'm sorry. It is sold out. It sells out so quicker and quicker every year. But if you would like to support
throwing it in your face.
We are going to keep throwing it in your face. Sucks to be you. Yeah.
Take that.
Maybe suck less next year and grab tickets early. Hey, man. But after having said that, please also donate to those guys.
Yes.
Because they could really use your support. No, you can donate directly to them at just through Venmo at Drunk Herstory SEA. So Drunk Herstory SEA. And if you do, you'll be supporting a wonderful organization. It's one of the most fun events that gets put on every year. I mean, the gist of it sounds exactly like what it is. A bunch of phenomenal women in this industry get absolutely shithoused and tell stories on stage in costumes about all of the influential women in and out of the industry throughout history. It's super fun, and there's all kinds of good beer and great stories, and you should absolutely get tickets if you can, but certainly support them if you can. Again, directly through Venmo at Drunk Herstory SEA. Yeah. So thank you. We got some delicious cider poured for us during the break.
Oh, yes. So
what are we drinking here, man?
This is a 2017 Macintosh single varietal. So anytime you're dealing with a single varietal, it's just that apple exclusively. So but included in our low and no maturation ciders, there's the special line that we have that we pretty much just keep in the tasting room.
Right.
Whether it's in the 750s or 500 milliliter bottles. And then there's even a really fun one that we do with an organization called City Fruit. So they're a nonprofit based up in Seattle that goes around to all the fruit trees in Seattle. You can let them know that you have a fruit tree. They collect the fruit and they're able to donate it to the local food banks.
Oh, cool.
So, but not all the fruit. The fruit still has to meet standards to be able to be given out at the food banks. And so any of the fruit that doesn't meet those standards comes back to us.
Oh, it's a
and we
community
do
cider.
a city fruit cider every year. I even remember one year I tried to collect apples here. I convinced you, Sean, that like, hey, maybe we can, and we got like a couple 5-gallon buckets, and that was about it. But through the organization of City Fruit, they bring totes and totes in, and we press that all in house. And every year it tastes different because every year the apples experience different things, and there's a different blend of apples. And so then the proceeds go back from that sale to City Fruit. They've gone from utilizing about 60 to 65% of the fruit that they harvest to well over 95%. So between what they are able to get to the food banks and what comes to us, we're able to make full use of all their hard work and then get them additional funding as well.
That's so cool.
That's rad.
It is
man.
amazing
That's badass.
organization. Yeah, so we've got Macintosh, and we also have a winter banana. There is no banana in there. It's called that because of what the apple actually looks like and smells like. So it's a really, really cool to be able to showcase the individual fruits in our single varietal series that we have. And we've come out with different things. We've had single varietal wine saps and a lot of different apples. There's that not a ton of people know about. And then as, craft cider has emerged, the use of the more culinary and dessert apples has increased. So, these kind of get put in the shadows a little bit more often, which is unfortunate because
You guys are out here to highlight that shit.
got to try to highlight,
That's awesome.
elevate the education as well as the social inebriation. I tried. There's a stretch.
That's a really
but
astute
tried.
way of telling us you want to get people drunk.
In a
Good on
very
you.
responsible way.
So, Eric, you went from washing kegs for free
Oh yeah.
to your job today. I think you probably have done everything at the two joints. And what is your job today?
So my job today is I run our supply chain. I run our supply chain, our purchasing, and our forecasting.
For both?
For both, yes.
So you could order an Opal apple and an Opal hop will arrive?
Yeah.
Rob's been waiting 2 weeks to make that joke.
Yeah,
too.
we'll see. We'll see. We'll see how that works. Let me just take a note real quick. So yeah, I went from when we first started Seattle Cider, I was a little bit more operational at that time, but because of the territory that Two Beers had already established, it really needed more than one sales rep, and we had one sales rep at the time, so we had to expand sales. So for Seattle Cider, of the 3 people that we had there, it was decided I was the least worst option. And I lived in Tacoma, which made it even better if we were going to be expanding more
That's
to
why
the
my wife
south.
and I are married.
It's like, I've seen worse, so I guess you're okay. From there, I ran our sales and distribution in the South Sound and Oregon for 5 years. And then I came in-house to be director of operations. And then once we got acquired by the French co-op, there needed to be a shift in roles and responsibilities and things like that, and more of a corporate-esque reporting structure. And so at that point, I started moving more into the supply chain management, purchasing, and all that other stuff. So fancy way of it is, I can't even believe, like, I'm reading pulp and paper index reports, and I'm looking at aluminum adjustments, and I'm trying
I used to be a farmer, damn it.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have asked me, even when I moved into operations 5 years ago, what I think I would be doing, because I even remember when I ran our lab, I used to make our own auger, like in-house, to be doing any of the samples. And I don't have a background in biology at all. Mm. And so I've done all that. The only positions I have not held have been CEO, head brewer, or head cider maker. But I've been in production. I ran our social media when we launched.
Damn.
Like, if you go deep on the Seattle cider and even some of the Two Beers social media back in the day, it's me running around taking pictures and doing stuff like that.
Damn, dude.
And that was
quite the support beam.
That was
Holy
it was
shit.
like you did everything then. I mean, there were in our entire company, between the brewery and the cider company, we had, like, at the time I came on, it was like 5 of us.
Yeah.
And so you had to do everything.
Sure.
And you had fun doing it. I mean, going from everything from that to, I even remember I was talking with our HR manager, because that's a thing that you have now, is HR managers.
When you get to a certain point, yeah.
Yeah. Like, and
Sean's
it's
like,
a
I
little
hope not.
suspicious. Like, they put her office right next to mine, so I think I don't know. I've got my thoughts on that. But she and I were talking about some of the early days, because it was some things came up with how we were licensed. And so there isn't a ton of people at the company that have been around for 10 years. I'm the guy. And so even trying to look into why are we licensed as a tavern when we could have just been like 2 tasting rooms. But at that time, the law was set up that if you had a brewery in that address, you could have a brewery tasting room. It could be all ages. That's fine. Mm-hmm. And if you had a winery, you could have a winery tasting room, all ages. It's fine. But if you tried to pour beer and wine next to each other, that's a no-no. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, you cannot do that. That is illegal. And you're like, that is one of the silliest things in the world. Like you're just taking that wall down between the two sides. Like, what's the big deal? And we couldn't get around it. I thought it was a really, really silly rule.
And crowlers.
Oh yeah,
cider.
and then filling cider
Mm-hmm.
in a growler at the time, because it was
that's naughty.
It was re-kegging wine at the time.
Yeah.
So even at that point,
I
like,
didn't even think about that.
As
Holy
cider was
crap.
reaching,
There was a fucking sting about that.
oh yeah,
In town.
Oh,
yeah.
because you had to be licensed individually
People
to
got
re-keg
pinched.
wine. Oh, it was
for throwing cider and growlers.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Holy fuck.
Yeah. Well, and then even
The things
right
we give a shit
as
about.
as craft cider was kind of reaching its like real big boom early on, that
Right.
nearly 10 years ago, you had brewery tasting rooms that were like, this is great, this is amazing. Let's start pouring cider. And it was illegal at the time. Like, they couldn't do it. And it was thankfully already in the works, but it was one of the things that I thought was the silliest thing. So I reached out to our district representative, and I'm like, hey, I think this law is really silly. And he's like, yeah, it kind of is. I'm like, well, what can we do about it? He's like, you want to change it? And I'm like, yeah, but how do you do that? He's like, I've got a guy. And so that the law that allowed brewery tasting rooms to pour other breweries' beers on up to 25% of their taps we hopped onto that, added another amendment that it could also be local ciders as well, without having to seek additional licensing. So that was back in like, gosh, was that 2017, 2016? I can't remember. I think it was 2017 where that went into effect. But like, it took almost 2 years to get done.
There are so many fucking people in the state that owe you a fruit basket, Eric. Are you shitting me?
Yeah. So that was my law. That was my law that went
Holy
into effect.
shit.
I got invited down, like when Inslee signed it into law, like got my picture taken with him. He gave me the pen, like got my picture taken with our district representative. It was really cool. I tried to get Inslee to like hold one of the cider cans, and he's like, yeah, we're not gonna do that.
Quit while you're ahead.
I'm
you
like,
fuck.
I had to try. But it was a really cool thing. And then I remember, I think it was the Everett Brewers Fest, like was like that weekend or the next day. And like that was the buzz around with all the breweries. They're like, yeah, we can legally serve cider. We can legally serve cider. And I'm just like, it was really cool to see such appreciation for that.
Dude,
Because
yeah.
that was...
It's a game changer.
Oh, it was huge.
For like anybody who goes to a brewery or anybody who goes anywhere that like, you know, that wants to bring the group of friends or whatever, or a date
Yeah.
that doesn't drink beer, fucking cool, we're in.
Yeah.
Like, game changer.
So very technically, it'd be up to 25% of their total taps could be other local ciders, and unlimited packaged product to go. So like people could bring in a cold case and throw stuff in there. And that was kind of a really cool opportunity. I mean, for us, we were already up and operating and running. There was like the option where it's like, oh, do you want it to be, you know, other local cider or ciders for anywhere in Washington State, or do you want it to be, you know, if the brewery and cider company are owned by the same people, then they can kind of do the whole thing and not have to get a tavern license. It's like, how about like everybody?
Yeah.
Like, even if it's only 25%, I mean, it's going to open a lot more opportunity for consumers as they're coming in. For every single tasting room that's out there, they can pour a tap or two of cider. They can have some cans in there. You know, other cider companies that are coming out that are maybe, you know, they don't have big distribution, but they've got a local brewery that's next to them that's kind of getting more traction.
Right.
And, you know, that's more of a draw because people know that now they've got another opportunity there. Yeah. And so it's the, you know, the added rising tides raise all ships.
Totally.
So like if we can grow the market, grow the opportunity there, then it's going to be a lot better for everyone. And then it's also a value add to any of the tasting rooms, brewery tasting rooms. So, you know, they have that option for the people that, you know, are gluten intolerant or celiac or something, that then they have that experience they can share with their friends too.
I feel like you're being really
Clutch.
casual about this,
Yeah.
but everybody owes Eric a fruit basket. Just so you know.
On the political side of it,
Yes.
shot in the dark, Arlen Harris have anything to do with it?
No, actually.
Damn.
Steve Berquist.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome guy. Like, to this day, if he's up in the neighborhood, he'll call me up or text me. Like, we'll check in on each other during pandemic, see how the kids are doing. It's like, it was a very surreal experience. Just to be able to go through, never having had experience in trying to introduce a law.
Right.
Or a bill or anything, and then even having to go down and, you know, it's like, oh, now you have to argue your points. You know, you've got some people that they're bringing it into a hearing. They want to argue against this. You know, are you available? Thankfully, the people that wanted to argue against it didn't show because I had no idea what I was going to do. I'm down there in the room waiting. And since they didn't
First
show
time
up
up to
argue
bat, you
against
got to buy? That's pretty fucking good.
yeah, I'm like, oh gosh. But they ended up not showing up, so it was okay. But yeah, like one and done. I'm like, hey, I want to change that law. Okay, I found someone that would help me out through the entire process, hold my hand, push my bill into law, and there we go. And it's like, wow, I can imagine not everybody has this experience. This is
Probably
kind of a privileged experience for sure. You know, one and done on Rainier, you know. don't ever think I was going to climb a mountain. Never
Mm-hmm.
tried before in my life. And then opportunity presented itself. Yeah, let's go for it.
You climbed Rainier?
Oh, yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah. That was, we partnered with,
I'm learning so much about you, Eric.
our head brewer at the time, Jesse. He's a little suspicious that I had a concussion when I climbed. My cat knocked a picture off a shelf and it hit me right in the ear, and
Okay,
it
hang
was
on.
weird.
Let me just get the timeline here.
Yeah.
Your cat gave you a fucking concussion, and then you climbed Mount Rainier?
Yeah.
Cool, just want to make sure I had...
Yeah. I mean, that's how you do it. But yeah, so we were able to climb Mount Rainier. We'd send a group every year. It was with Climb for a Cause, and it was a great opportunity. You know, that organization has, you know, it's just super good stuff. Yeah, so one and done.
Okay.
Climb Rainier. Like, we had people that were almost blown off the mountain the night before because it was 70-mile-an-hour sustained winds, like at Muir.
Yeah.
The next day, gorgeous. No winds, made the ascent. It was such a breathtaking experice.
When you
Like-
said your friends almost got blown off the mountain by 70-mile-an-hour winds, my butthole clenched up like a bear trap.
Yeah,
So,
Like, it's-
because I'm afraid of heights, man.
it's a real thing. But to be able to be even up on the glacier, because Ingraham Flats was another place that we ended up camping after arrest training. But as weird as it is, you know, to have the area where they carve out for the bathroom is right on the edge of the glacier, and you're looking out at Little Tacoma, as like this is the coolest bathroom ever. I mean, it's also freezing temperatures up there, and it's a glacier, but like to be able to be right out there and see that is just such.
I appreciate
a
how
cool
glass half
experience.
full you are about
Yeah.
it.
Definitely better than the outhouses at Muir.
Oh, those were rough.
Yeah.
Very rough. But if you don't want to blue bag it, then there you go.
So, Eric, this is your chance to tell us how you get fresh hops first.
So, I was a little tease earlier talking about Tyler Pickle. Being that his family is one of the hop families in Yakima, we had always just had that relationship with him. And it's kind of scary and sketchy because Tyler will just, you know, check in with Tyler, just be like, hey, how are the hops looking? What's going on?
It's
He's like,
August 3rd.
yeah. And he's like, they're great. We're going to be sending, you know, the machines out into the field in like 2-3 weeks. You know, this is our early field. You know, what do you want? And like presents, you know, 3 or 4 different hops. And we just get a U-Haul and we drive over and he drops a pin. We meet him in the middle of nowhere, some random hop field. I remember one year Tyler said, you know, somebody might come out and start yelling at us. If so, just close the door and just take off. I'm like, are we gonna die here? No,
fuck,
probably not
man.
die. Like, no, that's crazy. But we just go over, grab them, and then drive back. And so last year was really cool. They've changed up the lots of where some of the hops have been growing the last couple of years. They kind of rotated the fields, and we were able to bring out a lot larger of a group to go actually into the fields for hop picking. And we've kind of made it we've opened it up to more in our company, because typically it would just be, you know, the one person who had the relationship got in a U-Haul, drove it all the way out there, grabbed a bunch of hop binds, threw them in the back of the truck, and drove back in the day. And I'll tell you what, that was a rough day.
Sure.
Oh, man. But now we've been able to, you know, adjust it to better fit our production schedule. We get first pick of hops, and then we bring them all back, and it's super cool because the community comes out and they help us pick the hops.
I love that.
So right out in front of the brewery or inside or wherever, like, the community shows up, they start picking hops, throwing them in the bucket, and then the next day they're pretty much all used in the brew.
Yep.
And so even as we've seen, like, just being able to make sure that you're getting them as soon as possible, they're less than 24 hours out of the ground, and you're using them that next day, like in the actual brew and in the boil and in the kettle, to really bring out that fresh hop quality is super cool to be able to do. And that's something that it's relationships. And I think that that's been one of the things that I've taken away from this entire decade so far, is that relationships that you make with people and that you make in the industry, and the name that you build in the industry can far exceed, the size of your company or the reach of your company. Because, we're not a huge brewery. We're not Georgetown. We're not, any of these guys.
Yeah, fuck those guys.
I mean, if they weren't...
I'm joking. I'm joking.
If they
I'm joking.
weren't...
Fuck.
That wasn't a funny joke.
But, I mean, and it's like, and I tell them to their face, if they weren't such nice people...
The sweetest people ever.
Every single one of them, I'm like... Whatever you put in the Kool-Aid at your company, like, I'll drink it, man. Like, that is delightful to bump into Roger randomly in Bend, because I was just like so excited that there was this tall person that was able to shade me from the sun, being like a super short bald guy. And I look up and it's just like, oh, hey, Eric. I'm like, what? Okay. Sure.
He would stand there as long as you needed.
Yeah, but
because Roger's awesome.
Roger's awesome like that. Manny's awesome like that. Every single person there, and even having the brewery be in such close, like, there are neighbors too. So I mean, even when it was a very humbling experience when they put in their canning line, they're like, "Hey, you're the next nearest people that we know that can beer. Can we kind of come over and see how you break down seams, how you do this, how you do that?" Not only are they huge, but they're humble, they're kind.
I love that.
And the example that they set really is something that everybody can imitate. And so that's one of the things that's like, you build a good name, you build a good relationship. It doesn't matter the size of your brewery, it doesn't matter the size of your cider company, it doesn't matter the size of your bar. Like, you can have, just be a good person. Don't be a jerk. And you can, the things that you can do, the relationships that you can build, pay back so much. I mean, there's not a ton of people that are able to go out and just pull hop vines out of the ground. There's not a ton of people that are able to go out and just gather fruit from the local community and then be able to make a cider and, like, get the proceeds back. There's not a lot of people that can build that community, like we had talked about earlier, of just that invite people in. And then you become greater than the sum of your parts. And so to have places like Parkway, like Peaks, like Tacoma, the brewing industry, the cider industry, to be able to, like, build that community and build people is such an amazing experience.
And the hop thing too, like, sounds like you're doing it, like, actually above the board.
Choke up your
Oh yeah, so
because it
now
sounded like before is like, yeah,
it was sketch.
We
before.
run out, we grab the hops. If someone shows up,
like run.
midnight run, yeah,
exactly.
Like, all right, bring your red light. You don't want
exactly.
flashlights.
Nope.
Someone's gonna come out to yell at you, shut the door, drive out, and during the daytime.
Straight up, you got your blocker car that's ready for you. That
I've
you're
done
able,
a lot of. I've done a lot of this work myself.
Yeah, wink, wink.
Say you're from Georgetown.
Yeah.
Exactly. I just wear a Manny's t-shirt and a Roger hat, and it's
The
like
night
nobody
vision
knows.
and the red light technology are
They've really
have
advanced.
advanced the craft.
Oh yeah, it has done so well. But
It's
yeah,
hard enough to
and-
picture like a scene like your hop harvest turning into like a scene from like No Country for Old Men, like
it's just
just fucking
Yeah.
escaping Yakima with
comes
like
the
the
trucks,
trucks.
like,
Yep.
Oh yeah. One thing you don't want to do is get anyone in Yakima upset with you. Like,
Fair enough.
Just don't mess with Yakima. And then that's the other fun thing too, is like looking through all the years to even see, Kevin from Bale Breaker. He brewed at our brewery as well. Like, to see so many people that, have been Two Beers involved or Two Beers adjacent that are still in the industry and still are doing just amazing things is just so cool to see.
Yeah, almost as cool as fuck up stories.
Yeah, you have to have a quick one.
Which here we are.
Does it
Yeah.
Does it have to be about me? Because I know a guy that really screwed some things up. No, I won't talk about that. But
If it's a good story, I don't give a shit.
This is a great story. People can read about this one in the fucking newspaper.
So there is, well, Church Key wouldn't really fall in that category. We contract brewed for Church Key. They were kind of a flash in the pan. It was bulging cans. It was a mess.
Can grenades.
Yeah, can grenade. And I hand packed those 6-packs.
Oh,
And had to put the Church Key in there too. Oh, it was awful.
damn, dude.
But there's a couple. So real quick, we were, it was kind of the inception of our Gin Botanical cider.
Great fucking cider.
It was just great cider, but it kind of came about by accident. And it
all right.
almost literally blew up in our face. So we were making an anniversary beer for the beverage place. I think it was, I can't remember what year it was. It might have, we were making a gin porter. I know that much. And there was
2015.
Just go with
yes. Yep. Yeah. Because it was at the very start of the cider company. Yeah, it was back in 2015. Yeah.
Damn.
So we made a gin porter for him. We had some spent gin botanicals still left over. And through it, our head cider maker at the time, it's like, hey, we've got some leftover juice. Why don't we just throw it into IBC? We'll let it ferment, see where we go. Puts it in there, screws on the top, puts one of those little airlocks on the top that you would put on top of a carboy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll be fine. A few days later, one of our cellar guys came in on the weekend to check on some beers, and as they came in, just hears this creaking and popping, and what was a cube of an IBC is now this horribly disfigured, bulging mass. And he's like, what do I do? And it's like, well, you gotta relieve the pressure. And so had to knock the top off of it.
Oh my
the thing
God,
just
dude.
geysered. We lose probably over half the product, but what was left tasted really, really good. So that became what's Gin Botanical. The other one is just like one of those most, to me, it's a story I tell anyone that works in our warehouse now of just being careful with things and just paying attention. We had just signed to our distributor. We were going to be hosting all of their like high level execs coming in, all their brand managers.
Oh, yeah.
They're developing craft, senior VPs, the CEO, the president of the company. They're all coming out. Like, this is going to be a thing, trying to make the space look real nice. I'm moving a pallet of cans, 16-ounce cans, and I'm like, okay, let's put it here. Let's do this. And there were some totes, big wooden crate apple totes that were in the space as well. And as I'm pulling the pallet, I'm realizing, oh man, someone just like cut the straps on this and that's it. Like, oh, I better be careful. I'm slowly coming around the corner and there's a splinter on one of the boxes that catches like the second slip sheet up from the bottom. Oh. And I just like, I feel that drag and I stop. I'm like, okay. Oh, we're fine. I see it. And then I just hear ting, 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 ting. And then just the cascade of like, I mean, it's 6,224 cans on a pallet.
Approximately.
Yeah, that's pretty fucking rad.
Yeah. And so then it's just like all of that. And they're like, all these people are walking in right now. They're on the other side. And I'm just like frantically scooping with slip sheets, like 6,000 cans that are strewn about.
Those things are so wide, too.
They're so wide. And the cans are so light. They go everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then they just start bouncing off each other and just going insane. But yeah, that's kind of, that's one that haunts me to this day because it's especially like and then you hear it and you're like, well, now it's like 13 cents. But you're like, well, there goes 11 cents. Tink, tink, tink. They fall. You can't use them. Like, it's all over. 8,169 cans on a 12-ounce pallet, though, if it's a standard diameter.
And if it's not?
If it's sleek, it's 8,096, which is kind of funny, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's hilarious.
Yeah. At 375, 7,795 cans.
We told Eric we were almost out of time, and he was like,
Yeah,
you know what? I'm going to drag this out.
Well, I thought Tipsy Toboggan Winter Ale name might have been a fuck up story.
No, that was intentional.
Yeah, that says no.
All right, Grit and Grainers. Hear me now, believe me later. Email us at cheers@gritandgrainpodcast.com with your comments, opinions, and bodybuilding haikus. Hans and Franz towels, an exquisite wedding gift. Thank you, Carney dude. We read and drink everything. What? We read and drink everything we receive, and we try to respond as quickly as we can. If not online, then on air. You can subscribe to Grit and Grain on Amazon, Apple Music, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and Stitcher. And please leave us a review. Also, check us out on Channel 253 and gritandgrainpodcast.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for episode notes, beer news, and ideas for what to do on a cold, rainy weekend in Tacoma. But the dream is always the same as you inhale deeply the finer and more boundless aromas, say like a snifter of Two Beers Tipsy Toboggan Winter Ale, while your back's against a roaring fireplace and your feet are snug in Ugg boots, and you don't quite feel like moving from the spot ever, and you sort of wish that you could have an auto refill switch on the snifter, but cue Tangerine Dream soundtrack, suddenly fireplace smoke clears and you find yourself in a room full of Association of Supply Chain Hop Operator Leadership applicants taking their certification boards, and you're 3 hours late and you have 2 minutes left to take the whole test, and you just made a terrible mistake. You'll never get to asshole. Your life is ruined. If this podcast is not what you expected, the acronym.
Yeah, I got it.
If this podcast is not what you expected, please alter your expectations. Make mulled wine in a bathtub because there's no other vessel large enough to hold the goodness. No such thing as a bad time to visit Tacoma. No such thing as too much barley wine. Tune in next Friday for more sweet chatter. Cheers.
Cheers.
I thought my haiku was funny.
That was delightful.
It was great.
0 laughs.
Thanks again for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us at Grit and Grain Podcast wherever you get your social media, and catch new episodes every Friday. Cheers.
Good up.
This is Channel 253.